Most people see it and reach for the hose, the shovel, or the nearest weed killer. For generations, we were taught the same reflex: pull it out before it spreads. Yet thousands of years ago, this small, ground-hugging plant was trusted as food, medicine, and survival in places where other crops failed. Then the memory faded. Lawns replaced wild gardens, eradication guides appeared, and what once fed civilizations was quietly rebranded as a nuisance. Only recently did scientists stop to examine what we had been destroying, and what they uncovered challenged long-held assumptions about nutrition, resilience, and even the limits of plant biology. So how did one of the most nutritionally dense plants on Earth become something we are trained to eliminate? And what might it reveal if we finally stopped pulling it out? It rarely grows taller than your ankle, yet it survives conditions that wipe out entire fields. You'll find it pushing through sidewalk cracks, threading across dry gardens, even settling into soil so salty most crops fail within days. Its stems carry a faint red tint, its leaves are thick and smooth, and after a light rain, it spreads with quiet confidence, as if the ground had been waiting for it. This is Purslane, known scientifically as Portulaca oleracea, a plant so adaptable that botanists now rank it among the most successful wild edibles on Earth. Often dismissed as a weed, it has followed human settlement for thousands of years, emerging wherever soil is disturbed and sunlight is generous. Its presence beside us is far older than modern nutrition science. Long before dietary guidelines existed, purslane was already part of the human table. Archaeological evidence traces its use back more than 2,000 years across the Mediterranean world. Seeds discovered at the Samian Heraeon in Greece suggest it was recognized and handled with care, while written records from the 4th century BC indicate that farmers were not merely tolerating the plant, they were deliberately cultivating it. Its reach extended far beyond a single region. Purslane appears across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, quietly embedding itself in local food traditions. In many places, it was gathered fresh and eaten raw for its crisp, slightly lemony taste, or added to cooked dishes where other greens struggled in heat. What makes its early presence remarkable was timing. Purslane thrived in disturbed soils, the very landscapes shaped by early agriculture. As settlements expanded and fields were turned, the plant followed, growing alongside humanity rather than waiting to be discovered. Evidence from North America tells a similar story. Seeds dated to around 800 BC in what is now Kentucky, and later finds in Ontario, indicate the plant had already naturalized across the continent long before modern trade routes. Whether carried intentionally or spread through migrating ecosystems, it endured. Ancient farmers did not have microscopes, yet they recognized reliability when they saw it. A plant that returned without replanting, tolerated heat, and provided steady nourishment earned quiet trust. For centuries, purslane was not dismissed or uprooted. It was gathered, eaten, and remembered, a familiar presence in the background of daily survival. Only later would science begin to explain what generations had accepted through experience. For most of modern history, purslane remained scientifically unremarkable, present, edible, but largely overlooked. That changed in the late 20th century when researchers began measuring what its small leaves were actually carrying. Nutrition scientist Dr. Artemis Simopoulos brought early attention to the plant after analyzing its fatty acid profile. Fresh purslane contains roughly 300 to 400 milligrams of alpha-linolenic acid per 100 grams, several times higher than commonly consumed leafy greens such as spinach. Alpha-linolenic acid is an essential omega-3, meaning the human body cannot produce it on its own. What truly surprised researchers was something even rarer: trace amounts of eicosapentaenoic acid, or EPA. This long-chain omega-3 is typically associated with fish and marine ecosystems. Finding it in a land plant challenged long-standing assumptions about where these nutrients originate. But the plant's chemistry did not stop there. Analyses have shown notable concentrations of vitamin E, beta-carotene, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, along with antioxidants such as glutathione and melatonin, compounds studied for their roles in cellular protection and sleep regulation. Meanwhile, population research was raising its own questions. The 7-country study, which followed over 12,000 men, found that farmers on the Greek island of Crete experienced unusually low rates of cardiovascular mortality despite diets relatively high in fat. Later investigations noted significantly elevated omega-3 levels within the population, linked in part to the regular consumption of wild greens, including purslane. Clinical findings deepened the intrigue. The Lion Diet Heart Study, involving heart attack survivors, reported dramatically lower mortality among participants following a Mediterranean-style diet rich in plant foods. By then, purslane no longer looked like a botanical footnote. It looked like a plant science had underestimated, and the deeper scientists looked, the clearer it became. The real surprise was not just what purslane contained, but how it stayed alive. For decades, purslane puzzled nutrition scientists. Then plant biologists began asking a deeper question. Not just what was inside the leaves, but how the plant managed to survive where so many others failed. The answer emerged in 2022, when researchers led by Dr. Erica Edwards at Yale University published findings in Science Advances. Purslane, they discovered, performs both C4 and CAM photosynthesis within the same cells, a combination long believed to be biologically incompatible. Most plants rely on one system or the other. C4 photosynthesis allows rapid growth under intense sunlight. CAM photosynthesis, by contrast, helps plants conserve water by opening their pores at night instead of during the heat of day. Each strategy solves a different environmental problem. Scientists had assumed the two could not operate together efficiently. Purslane does both. Under favorable conditions, it behaves like a fast-growing C4 plant. When drought arrives, it shifts gears, activating CAM pathways that dramatically reduce water loss. Instead of choosing between speed and survival, the plant moves between them. This flexibility helps explain its unusual endurance. Purslane can grow with a fraction of the water required by many staple crops, tolerate saline soils, and produce vast numbers of seeds, sometimes up to 200,000 from a single plant, with seeds capable of remaining viable in soil for decades. Researchers were no longer looking at a stubborn garden weed. They were studying a plant that had quietly solved one of agriculture's hardest challenges: how to keep growing when water disappears. And that realization raised an uncomfortable possibility. If resilience like this exists in plain sight, why had it been treated as something to eliminate? By the 20th century, purslane had acquired a new identity, not as food, but as an agricultural adversary. Extension bulletins began listing it among the world's most persistent weeds. Farmers were advised to remove it early, before it flowered. Garden manuals warned that even small fragments could reroot if left on moist soil. The concern was not imaginary. Purslane grows low to the ground, spreads quickly, and competes with crops for space, light, and nutrients. A single plant can release tens of thousands of seeds, many capable of surviving in soil for years before germinating when conditions improve. Mechanical removal often scatters those seeds further, turning one season's problem into the next. As modern herbicides expanded after World War II, chemical control became the preferred response. Today, the global herbicide market is valued in the tens of billions of dollars, supporting products designed to suppress broadleaf plants like purslane in row crops, orchards, and managed landscapes. Agricultural agencies publish detailed eradication strategies, and in many suburban settings, homeowner guidelines still encourage its removal to preserve uniform lawns. Yet the same traits that frustrate growers, rapid reproduction, environmental tolerance, independence from irrigation, are the very qualities plant scientists now study with interest. Purslane cannot be patented as a wild species, and its seeds require no annual purchase. It persists without careful tending. Industrial agriculture favors predictability, crops that ripen together, harvest cleanly, and fit established supply chains. Purslane does none of this. It matures unevenly, clings close to the soil, and returns uninvited. So for decades, the response was simple. If it appeared, it was destroyed. Only recently has a different question begun to surface. What if eliminating it meant overlooking something valuable? As climate patterns grow less predictable, agriculture faces a familiar vulnerability. Many of the world's staple crops were bred for stability. Reliable rainfall, moderate temperatures, and consistent soil conditions shaped the modern food system. When those conditions shift, yields often follow. This is where Purslane has quietly returned to scientific conversation. Researchers studying drought-tolerant crops point to its unusual efficiency. Because it can switch between C4 and CAM photosynthesis, the plant reduces water loss while continuing to grow, a rare balance between conservation and productivity. Studies show Purslane can survive on significantly less water than many conventional crops, while tolerating heat and saline soils that would quickly stress others. Its resilience extends underground. Seeds can remain viable for decades, waiting for disturbance and moisture before germinating. In ecological terms, this is a long-term survival strategy, a way of ensuring the species persists through cycles of environmental change. Agronomists have increasingly grouped plants like Purslane among climate-resilient crops, species capable of supporting food systems in marginal lands where traditional agriculture struggles. At the same time, interest in nutrient-dense plants has grown as public health researchers encourage more diverse diets built around hardy greens rather than heavily processed staples. None of this suggests Purslane will replace major grains or reshape agriculture overnight. But its biological advantages offer something increasingly valuable: optionality. A plant already adapted to scarcity requires less reinvention when conditions grow difficult. For centuries, Purslane succeeded without careful management. Now scientists are beginning to see that success differently. In a future defined by constraint, the plants that endure may matter more than the ones that merely produce. And perhaps the most remarkable part is this: it was never gone. It never disappeared. No expedition needed to rediscover it, no remote valley sheltered its return. Purslane remained exactly where it had always been, along garden edges between paving stones, threading quietly through farmland and vacant lots. What changed was perception. By the mid-20th century, Western agriculture had drawn a sharper line between crops and weeds. Plants that volunteered themselves, grew unpredictably, or resisted tidy cultivation were increasingly treated as intruders. Purslane's strength, its ability to appear without planting, became the very reason it was overlooked as food. Yet in many parts of the world, memory never fully faded. Across the Mediterranean, it continued to appear in traditional dishes. In parts of Mexico, it is known as verdolagas, simmered into stews and sauces. Middle Eastern cuisines still value its bright, slightly tangy leaves in salads. What one culture removed from its lawns, another carried to the table. Interest has begun to widen again. Nutrition researchers study its fatty acids. Botanists examine its drought tolerance, and chefs experiment with a green once dismissed as ordinary. Even seed catalogs now list cultivated varieties, signaling a quiet shift from eradication to curiosity. The plant itself has made no such adjustment. It grows as it always has, adaptable, uninvited, unconcerned with reputation. Sometimes knowledge is not erased. It is simply set aside until circumstances make it visible again. And Purslane raises a possibility difficult to ignore. The future of food may arrive as something that has been growing beside us all along. Anyway, what do you think? If we were taught to pull it out without question, what else have we been trained not to recognize? Share your thoughts in the comments section below, leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.